Go to the CIA website right now. Go to the electronic reading room, type in Adam and Eve. You won't find religious text. You'll find a document. That document is titled CIA-RDP 79B00752A0003000700001-8. It is a digital scan of a book published in 1963, but there's a problem. The book is supposed to be nearly 300 pages long, and the file on the CIA website is only 57 pages. The rest is missing. Why does the world's most powerful intelligence agency possess a censored copy of a fringe geology book? Why was it kept in a classified file for 50 years? The book describes a pole shift, not a slow one, a fast one, a cataclysm that turns the Arctic into the tropics and the tropics into ice in less than 24 hours. It argues that all of this has happened before, and it argues that Noah's flood was real and most terrifying of all. It argues that we're due for the next one. Today, we're going to be reading the file they don't want you to see. Let's start with the document itself. The cover letter is dated June 24th, 2013. It releases the document under the Freedom of Information Act. But look at the original classification markings. It was sanitized. The book was written by a man named Chan Thomas. Now, skeptics will say Chan Thomas was just a crackpot writer. But if you dig into his background, things get a little weird. Chan Thomas wasn't a sci-fi novelist. He was an electrical engineer. He worked for McDonnell Douglas. He worked for the U.S. Air Force, and he was a specialist in aerospace. In the book's dedication, he thanks General Curtis Lee May, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, for his inspiration. This wasn't a random guy. This was a man with a security clearance, and in 1963 he wrote a book claiming that the science of geology was wrong and that the Pentagon knew the truth about the end of the world. The CIA picked up this book, they filed it, and for decades it disappeared from public conversation. Why? Let's open the book and find out. The central thesis of the Adam and Eve story is a concept called the revolving shell of the earth. Thomas argues that what we are taught, that the earth is solid, is actually not really solid, but actually the outer shell, the lithosphere, floats on a layer of molten slush. Usually friction keeps it in place, but Thomas claims that every few thousand years a trigger, possibly magnetic or solar, lowers the viscosity of the slush layer and then the shell slips. This isn't a magnetic flip where your compass points south. This is a physical flip. The North Pole physically moves to the equator. According to the document, this happens in a matter of hours. I want to read you a quote from CIA file. This is page 7 where Thomas describes the moment the event begins. This is some of the most terrifying writing I've ever read because you have to visualize it. Here's the quote. In 1/4 to half a day, the poles move almost to the equator. The atmosphere and oceans don't shift with the shell. They just keep rotating west to east. End quote. Think about the physics of that. The ground stops and moves 90 degrees. The wind doesn't. If the Earth rotates at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator and the crust suddenly shifts, you get a 1,000 mile per hour supersonic wind. Quote, the wind acts like a supersonic wall of water, automatizing everything in its path. Cliffs and mountains are blown away like sand. End quote. And then comes the water. Quote, oceans suspended by momentum sweep over the continents, a wall of water 2 miles high. End quote. He describes a complete reboot of civilization. In less than a day, the great cities are erased. The survivors are the ones lucky enough to be in the high mountains or deep caves. They emerge into a stone age with no memory of the technology that came before. Thomas claims this is the story of Adam and Eve. They weren't the first humans. They were the survivors of the last shift. This sounds like a movie, but Thomas, and the CIA file, points to physical evidence. The smoking gun, a woolly mammoth. We are taught that the Ice Age ended slowly, but Thomas points to some of the mammoths found in Siberia. These animals aren't just frozen, they're flash frozen. Some have been found standing upright, with undigested food in their stomach, and most importantly, with flowers, specifically buttercups in their mouths. Buttercups don't grow in the Arctic tundra. They grow in temperate climates, and you don't die with a flower in your mouth if you slowly freeze to death over 100 years. Thomas argues that the only way this happens is if the climate changes instantly. 1 minute the mammoth is grazing in a warm meadow, the next minute the pole shifts, the 1,000 mile per hour wind hits, the temperature drops to negative 150 degrees in seconds, and the mammoth is frozen solid before it can even swallow the flower. Thomas writes, quote, there is only one thing that can explain this. The lands of the temperate zone were moved to the polar circle in a matter of hours, end quote. The CIA analyst read reading this had to ask themselves, is he right? If the Soviets trigger a nuclear war, that's bad, but if the planet itself is a ticking time bomb, well, that's a strategic nightmare, isn't it? So when's the next one? This is where the sanitized version gets suspicious. Chan Thomas attempts to build a cycle. He claims these cataclysms happen roughly every 6,500 to 11,500 years. 11,500 years ago was the end of the Ice Age, the destruction of Atlantis as well, according to Thomas. 6,500 years ago was Noah's flood. If you do the math, we are in the danger zone. Now look at the CIA file again. The released version is 57 pages, but the original book covers religion, Jesus, who Thomas claims was a scientist trying to warn us, and detailed future predictions. Why did the CIA keep the specific 57-page excerpt out of 300? Where are the rest of the pages? What do the rest of the pages say? It has to be something important based on just what we're able to access with the 57 pages. The leading theory is that the CIA was investigating catastrophism as a national security threat. If the public believed the world was going to end next Tuesday due to a geological slip, the economy would collapse, people would stop paying taxes, and the government loses control. By classifying the book, or at least keeping tabs on it, they were managing the narrative. But there's a darker theory. What if the missing pages contain the data that proves the mechanism? What if Chan Thomas, the Air Force engineer who had access to magnetic field data that showed the trigger, had already started? We know the Earth's magnetic North Pole is moving. It's moving faster now than at any point in recorded history. Is the CIA watching the pole move, clutching this book, waiting for the snap? The Adam and Eve story is a terrifying document, not because it's definitely true. Geologists hate this book. They say that the crust doesn't slip like that. But it is terrifying because the government took it seriously enough to archive it. It paints a picture of humanity not as the masters of Earth, but as temporary tenants. We build our cities, we invent our iPhones, we fight our wars, and then the planet shrugs, the shell slips. We are washed away, leaving only a few survivors to start the story of Adam and Eve all over again. Is reality a simulacrum? Maybe. Are we being watched by aliens? Maybe. But the scariest monster might just be the ground beneath our feet. We've dug through the CIA's files on the mind, the body, and the soul. We've looked at the end of the world, but there is one place we haven't looked, a place that is mentioned in the Adam and Eve story as a previous home of civilization, a continent that is currently frozen, guarded by treaties and off limits to regular people. For our next investigation, we're putting on our parkas, and we're going to Antarctica. We're going to investigate Operation High Jump, the time the U.S. Navy sent an entire battle fleet to Antarctica in 1946, supposedly to test equipment, but returned early with casualties and rumors of flying saucers. Did Admiral Byrd find the entrance to Hollow Earth, or did he find the remnants of a civilization Chan Thomas wrote about? If you want to know what's hidden under the ice, hit the subscribe button. The link to the full Declassified Adam and Eve PDF is in the description. Read it before the pole shifts. I'll see you in the cold.